kindly compiled a lot of clips from various media outlets. So all these clips are not from C4. We did not produce it. We compiled it from available clips on the internet, from the internet. So just to give anyone who is not familiar with the topic some background of the issue. Let me just play this for you. Why? No sound. Oh shit. Sorry, I was just informed that there was no sound to the video, but it's fine. I will just continue playing from the middle. Okay, so that provides a little overview of the background and the problem that we have faced, mainly in 2018 and 2019. And next is a short clip also prepared by my colleague Arif about some residents sharing their experiences back then.
I get some information that some people is doing some boiling plastics activity, so I was curious. First of all I saw a lot of plastic in the jumbo bag in the factory. I started to send a report to the authority, and gradually after 1 month we found another 5, another 7. So 3 months later it's total up to 17 already. And then another 2 months later it up to more than 30.
我嘅查某囝是真正健康嘅囡仔咯，了是2019年 start 起咯，3月一開始伊鼻孔敏感，然後流鼻甲梢咯。第3道伊入樓嘅時， 一烧到40度，然后底下变准了噻，因为空气的问题导致影响咯，就讲伊是 bronchitis 咯。
We noticed around about May 2019, there was more cases of respiratory problems. We realized that it was from those factories because they operated at night.
2019这边嘅是迄袂咩维持嘅啦，因为水什么垃圾污染啊，那是这个样食是无看到啦，因为基本上是知影个变有白色啦，有啊，迄时我要拍人咯，你无拍样都维持咯，想要拍人了咯，规个猪要拍人要卖人了，无人会食，价钱无人会食咯，无变咯，家己做咯，家己个去种嘅咯。
Okay, is this a fair trade? Is it compared to your concept of human right? Or this is a hypocrite method that you use more than 10 years, more than 20 years? Last time to China, now to us.
Okay, thank you very much for watching those two clips. So it provides an overview of the problem. I'm going to run through my slides very quickly because my this webinar will only focus on one small aspect of my entire report. So we have one report and one brief, and on the right you can see a quick outline of the report. I trace the value chain and I try to identify the people involved. And these are the main objectives of my research, to come into it from a governance point of view and illegality. How is it possible that all this illegal activity has been going on for so long? And who did what and what happened exactly from the point of governance? So I interviewed 40 people and more, but the main ones were these 40 semi-structured interviews. I am very, very thankful to everyone who was willing to speak to me, including people from the government agencies. You can see the federal government, the state government, there's no one from the local government here. I made many, many calls to Kedah, Penang, Selangor local government. I tried contacting local councillors. Nobody wanted to speak to me. So I'm very grateful for everyone who accepted my request to interview. So very quickly, this is the value chain and the many processes and people and agencies involved. And on top of this, we have federal government, state government, and local government doing different things. So I just want to draw your attention to the first one here at ports. The DOE, the Solid Waste Department, JPSPN, and Customs have done a lot working together, carrying out joint operations, collaborating with each other, sharing knowledge to try to address this issue at the ports. And then when we come to the factories, the waste factories, when the community first started complaining in February 2018, nothing was done all the way until July 2018. So in the early months, there was a big problem. Whose jurisdiction is it? Is it yours? Is it mine? The Department of Environment replied the residents and said that plastic recycling factories do not need our approval at that time. So there was a lot of confusion about who should do what. And then when we come to waste disposal, in Malaysia, we have solid waste and we have scheduled waste. So scheduled waste is hazardous toxic waste that requires special treatment. So the disposal of scheduled waste or toxic waste is under the Department of Environment. The disposal of household and industrial waste that is not toxic, not hazardous, there are many different people. So in 7 states and 1 federal territory, it's up to the local council. Several local councils have subcontracted it out to government-linked companies in charge of waste management. And on the other hand, we have some 6 states and 2 federal territories under the federal government. So you can see here SW Corp. SW Corp is a statutory body created to handle and implement waste collection policies planned and by the federal government under the local government ministry. So there's so many people involved, and so it's so complex that it's easy for things to fall through the cracks. So aside from tracing the value chain, I focused on how the different actors in society had different interests. So society, they want to live better lives, they want to live clean lives. The state, the government did all they could. They did a lot, and they recently won an award from UNEP for the enforcement action against this illegal plastic waste. And then we have the businesses. We have a very established plastic industry in Malaysia. This was their annual report in 2019, highlighting all their activities in 2018. So they had a lot of engagement with the government about how to solve this plastic waste issue. And I believe that the legitimate plastic businessmen were very willing to comply with all the new regulations that were set by the DOE. But the strange thing is, all this foreign waste was coming into Malaysia. And as you can see, their annual report says, don't litter. Okay, I'm just going to leave that thought with you. And quickly, I highlighted 4 main themes that I realized that everyone is fighting against. My report is titled Citizens Against Corruption, Complacency, Crime, and Climate Crisis. But citizens does not only refer to the resident activists or NGOs or CSOs. It refers to everybody, because every good person in playing different roles, different stakeholders are all fighting against these challenges in Malaysia. The enforcement agencies, the officers, they told me that I wish we can just ban the imports of plastic waste, because they keep seeing it at the ports and it's so difficult. You can't check thousands of containers coming through the ports, and there's so much misdeclaration of what goods you're bringing in. They're smuggling. So it's very difficult for the enforcement agencies. From the side of the businesses, they're getting a lot of bad press because of these illegal activities as well. So it's a fight that involves everyone. And it is here that we see how important this so-called rhetoric of good governance and transparency, accountability, freedom of information, these are values and rhetoric or values that civil society has been talking about for decades in Malaysia. And through this one case study, we see how important it is. If there was more information, if everyone could make more evidence-based decisions, we wouldn't have to grapple now with the consequences of all this illegality. So very quickly, these are the recommendations in the policy brief. You can see it on our website. And in Malaysia, we have a shared prosperity vision until, I think, 2030. So I would like to add, in Malaysia right now, our civil servants are working very hard, our people are working very hard, our businesses, the good ones are trying their best, but we severely lack political leadership. So I want to ask everybody, when we're talking about shared prosperity, whose responsibility is it? And you can contact us there. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass the floor now to Jia Yao, our moderator for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pui. Thank you for that very quick summary of your report. Obviously, that didn't cover the full breadth and the depth of your report, but I think that gives us a good idea and sets the ground for the panel discussion that we are going to have now. So the panel is going to discuss on the various themes that you have touched on in Puyi's research report. And we're very fortunate today to have a very excellent and diverse panel. We have 3 speakers from Malaysia, and we have 3 international speakers, and they all are excellent and esteemed representatives from the various sectors in related to this topic. So we will allocate 7 minutes to each speaker. And so there is a total of 6 of the panelists. And so we will go through them as mindful of time as possible. Now, for the participants, those who are participating on Zoom as well as on Facebook, make use of the Q&A box to post your questions. Yeah, do refrain from using the chat box because that will get lost So put your questions in the Q&A box, and let's try to be concise. So the focus is to make the most of the panelists, the panel that we have. So I hope the questions can be concise and be focused. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first panelist, YB Yo Bi Yin. YB Yo is the former Minister of MASTEC, which is the acronym for the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Climate Change. YB Yo, over to you now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you, Pui, for coming out with the reports to make things clear. And one of the things that I think should draw your attention is how many agencies and different levels of government it is involved in fighting this waste. So a lot of people say, so as a minister, can you solve that problem? The short answer is that we need all the agencies to come. So I just give you an idea of, because now we also have international audience. So I want to put an international perspective into this thing. So how does this happen? It happened when mid of 2017, China actually announced of a ban of plastic waste imports. So that happened by 2018. So January 2018, there is an influx of plastic waste into Malaysia. And then until the mid of 2018 and July 2018, when I became the Minister of Environment, that was one of the first cases that came to us. So I thought was plastic, illegal plastics recycling is just a normal illegal plastic. So we went and closed up to close the factories. And then we realized that the more you close, the more it happens in everywhere else. So we continue to close. By the end of 2018, we actually closed 100 of factories. So still 100 of factories, keep closing, but then it keeps mushrooming in other places, or they're reopening in the same place where the machineries of the DOE does not have enough power in handling that. So I begin to question, is that the right way to do it? Keep closing the illegal factories. So, and then one of the things that we found from all these illegal factories are that all of them actually are processing foreign waste. So I just remember in one of the, one of the enforcement, I went with them, I checked, oh, it's Sainsbury grocery bags, or it's from Linda from Germany. Well, it's very far away. So we found that, okay, why not we actually find out the problem at the source of the problem, that is at the ports. That is when we started an operation at the port to check the containers, and we realized that how big of a problem of foreign waste. But by then, a lot of influx of foreign waste are already to get into Malaysia. So we had to do two-pronged. One is to stop the source at the port. Another is continue to close the factories and continue to keep closing the factories and keep fighting them. It's more of a firefighting. So what we did in the port is that we go through, and as Pui has rightly point out, even at the port, there are many agencies that are involved. So it took us some time to have interministerial coordination to make sending back containers possible. So now I want to put an international perspective in this. So the international perspective is this, and the developed countries always think that all the waste that they separated, many developed countries, citizens diligently separated their waste, and thinking that all these waste are recycled, are sent for recycling. But what they did not know is actually all these waste are sent for recycling at their ports. And it was for the purpose of recycling. But at the end of the day, is actually a dumping at the developing country. And it is not only Malaysia. Malaysia, we recorded it well because we have the machinery and statistics to record all this influx of illegal waste. But I have just shared with you one experience. And I actually went in Singapore with the minister of, so there is a United Nations minister in Asia Pacific discussion. So a more least developed country, they say they face the same problem at that time. It was 2019, beginning of 2019. But they say, but we can't do anything. That's what they say. Because in a very least developed world, they do not even have the machinery to fight dumping. That was when I think that Malaysia have to take up the role that we need to fight dumping and be the voice. So that was beginning of 2019, and we tried to use a lot of, so let me just put it shortly because I only have 7 minutes. I tell you, if we do not track recycling well, that means from developed world, if we do not track the movement of plastic waste well, international recycling is the biggest scam of dumping, of plastic dumping. So that is why there is an amendment that is very important in the international transboundary movement of plastic. That is the Basel Convention Amendment. Basel Convention Amendment was approved by the 180 something signatories in the mid of 2019 to change this. Initially, plastic waste is on Annex 9. Annex 9 means you don't need a prior informed consent. If you want to send plastic waste, it's just a normal domestic waste. That means if I'm a country, let's say UK, wants to send, or I see a Australian milk bottle that's full of maggots in Malaysia port. So let's say, for example, if I'm Australian, I want to send to Malaysia, I can send it straight without a prior informed consent. But with the amendment in the Basel Convention, what happened is that they changed the categories of plastic. If you are readily recyclable and clean homogeneous plastic, it remains in Annex 9. But if it is that you need to process before recycling, it goes to Annex 2. That needs to have prior informed consent. And the other one, that if it is a heterogeneous and contaminated waste, it goes to Annex 9. So Annex 2 and Annex 9 need prior informed consent. That is the good start of a control of international movement, transboundary movement of plastic waste. Because with a prior informed consent under Basel Convention, then the receiving country will need to approve of the export country before they can come in. If they come into the country without the prior informed consent, then the receiving countries can send back the containers through Basel Convention. What we did then in 2019 was that we go through other clauses because there is no direct clause in the Basel Convention that allows that to happen. For us to send illegal plastic waste back to the export countries. But with the amendment that is in the mid of 2019, but come into effect in 2021, that means currently, in January 2021, the amendment come into effect. With this amendment coming into effect, it will make the countries that receive, that it will protect more forests, the developing country on the least developed world that receive this. You can now use the Basel Convention with the direct clause of sending back the container without any cost. When we send so the statistics that I get the last from the parliament was end of last year, we sent about 250 containers. So those that we sent are using a different clause and a different, so it's very indirect. But with this coming into effect, I very much look forward to a better control. And I can only say that this is only the first step towards controlling. Just think about it.
Thank you, YB.
So I have finished my time. So otherwise, I have long things to talk about.
Yeah.
I finished
Thanks,
my
YB.
time, and thank you very much.
YB, you have valiantly fought through a lot of information that you've shared with us, and especially on the important amendments in 2019. So thank you so much. Now, we have time for Q&A at the end. Hopefully, if all the speakers, we try to keep the time. Now, for the next speaker, we have Mageswari Sanggaralingam, who is a research officer with the Consumers Association of Penang, CAP, and the Honorary Secretary of Sahabat Alam Malaysia, SAM. Mages, the floor is yours now.
Okay, good day, everyone. Okay, first of all, I would like to congratulate C4 and the author of this timely and comprehensive report, and Sam as co-host of this webinar with C4. We hope that the participants who have tuned in will take actions, as an individual or also within the capacity of your organization to tackle this plastic pollution, not only on waste trade. Okay, so I will start off my presentation with an introduction of the Consumer Association of Penang and Sahabat Alam Malaysia. Consumer Association of Penang, or well known as CAP, was established in 1969. We work on various issues to ensure environmental and social justice. SAM is a sister organization of Sahabat of Consumer Association of Penang, and it was established in 1977. SAM is also a member of Friends of the Earth International. So plastic pollution is a transboundary movement. Plastic waste is a global issue threatening the whole planet. So that's the need for global interventions to seek solutions. If you see in the picture here, we have our local communities in Jarum, which is fighting the imports of plastic waste and also illegal recycling in their community. They were the first ones to highlight the issue of the waste dumping in Malaysia. And so CAP and SAM, with our international networks, as we are members of Gaia Global Alliance of Incinerator Alternatives since 2000, we're also members of the International Pollutants Elimination Network and Break Free from Plastic. We have been working on this issue of dumping of plastic waste, which is burdening the recipient communities, especially like developing countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, in the region. Yeah? And then what we have been seeing that since we are taking action here, the waste dumping is now moving on to other shores, to Africa and also to OECD countries because of the Basel Convention. So Turkey is actually now very much affected by all this dumping. So we've been working with all these communities. So we have been working with the local, next. With our international partners. Let me see. Okay, I don't seem to be able to go to the next slide. Can somebody help me? Yeah. Okay.
To click a few times, I had to click a few times just now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we've been working with our partners in terms of doing research and also analysis. With IPEN, we have been, IPEN is International Pollutants Elimination Network. We have been sending samples of recycled plastics for testing for toxic additives in it. And then in terms of the recycled plastics, they're also making into products. So how toxic are the products that we are using? So we have also been documenting from all our field work and the communities resistance. We have been documenting those experiences so that we can use it for our policy advocacy and also local advocacy. We have also been tracking waste from US, waste from Europe that has been coming to Malaysia. This is through official from the UN Comtrade data and also our counterpart in Ecology Center in Berkeley. They've also putting in tracking devices, and also Basel Action Network. They've been putting in tracking devices in the waste that is being sent. So we have found that some of these waste have been landing in Malaysia. Yeah? Some will be going to actual licensed premises for recycling, but then some are ending up in illegal premises. And we also found e-waste being brought in from the tracking by Basel Action Network. So we have been alerting the Malaysian government regarding all this illegal trade. Okay, and we have also been carrying out advocacy, as YB Yobin has mentioned, in the Basel Convention in COP14. Besides with our international partners networks, we have the Malaysian government was also very active in this COP14, looking into getting the plastic waste amendments to be approved. And Serene of Gaia was there, and we had been working with the Malaysian government, the Ministry of Environment in this part. And so this is an important tool to stop dumping of unwanted plastic waste. And I would not go further on this issue because YBO had already spoken on this matter. Okay, and so, but it's an important tool to stop dumping of unwanted plastic waste. So it's not going to stop all this dumping of plastic waste, but unwanted plastic waste, especially like mixed and contaminated waste. Next, we in terms of waste tracking and data, so we found that recently, although US is not a party to Basel Convention, out of a lot of countries, the US is not a party to Basel Convention, but we find that they are still exporting plastic waste. Yeah, and this is the latest data for January 2021, and Malaysia is the top recipient of US waste. And we also got news that there is one container which is probably mixed waste that is coming into Malaysia. And we also received information from the Department of Environment on what they consider as contaminated or mixed waste. So whatever waste that is coming in, plastic waste must be 95% recycling rate, must have that 95% recycling rate. And even that 5% of plastic contaminants or non-plastic contaminants must be able to be recycled. So it eventually means like 100% has to be able to be recycled, and it should not be containing hazardous waste. So, so these are the information that we get, and then we alert the government. Yeah, we have also come up with publications which we have published with Gaia, and also recently in January 2021, we had produced a case study on European waste trade impacts on Malaysia's zero waste future. This is also with Gaia and Zero Waste Europe. So these are the publications that we use for local advocacy. And so what are our demands? Prevent dumping, yeah, control plastic waste trade and eventually end it. And the exporting countries, they should take responsibility to recycle domestically, yeah. And in the meantime, we also need full traceability and transparency of whatever plastic waste shipment that is being sent. Because right now, if you look at the data that is coming in, we only get it a few months later, yeah? So we cannot track it. The most important is to prioritize source reduction. So redesign products, packaging and delivery system, and we also need to eliminate hazardous and single-use plastics, products and packaging. So we should all take responsibility. So you have our contact details. You can contact us for further information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margus. Up next, let's turn to Heng Kia Chun. Heng is a campaigner and spokesperson for Greenpeace Malaysia. Heng, over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Jaya. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay, try to finish it in less than 7 minutes. Okay, a little bit background of these plastic waste issues, like what YB, UOB and Margus already mentioned. Like here's our reports. For your information, like Greenpeace already released reports in 2018 to 2020. So in 2018, we exposed the first this global broken system, and to highlight that there's a global broken recycling system. And the second one in 2020, we also launched another report called the Recycling Myth 2.0 to highlight the toxic after effects of imported plastic waste in Malaysia. Okay, so we monitor together with other NGOs and local community. Here's the updates from the fields. In our first report, we highlight that a lot of the plastic waste, especially the contaminated plastic waste, originates from developing countries, were dumped into Malaysia. And in our investigations, we found that more than 19 countries dumped their plastic waste in Malaysia. And we also work closely with local community in Sungai Petani, Kedah, in Jenjarum, in Klang to expose these problems. So this is one of the examples. Okay, in 13th June 2020, so in Sungai Petani, some contaminated plastic waste that cannot be recycled were dumped into one illegal landfill or abandoned areas, I think, and also caused the fire. The plastic waste was just dumped and burned. And in this picture, we can see that we found a lot of plastic waste from Australia and New Zealand. And meanwhile, in Sungai Muda, which is a riverside in Kedah, we also found a lot of the plastic waste from Germany. So after that, we also have started some sampling in few places such as Sungai Muda, Jenjarum, Pulau Indah, Sri Chiding in Selangor to document all this evidence. Okay, this is one of the examples, one of the place in Sri Chiding. So in these pictures, you can see that there's a unregulated and now abandoned dump site at Sri Chiding. It has been filled and covered with shredded plastic as a layer of topsoil. And this layer of topsoil is contaminated with high concentrations of heavy metal, including the cadmium and lead, relatively to background environmental level. So in our investigations at this the dump site at Pulau Indah, where waste was burned, it also shows that a number of post-burn residue that were found that to contain several contaminants. Some informs that they are likely mobile compared to the source plastics, with additional chemical or compound generated during or as a result of the combustion process. So this is a significant contamination with hazardous chemical, including heavy metals and the presence of brominated flame retardants were found at the site where plastic waste were burned. So overall, the finding for all these investigations, we collect all these sampling and investigations have revealed that the shredded plastic disposed at several dump site in Malaysia contains a range of metal and organic chemical, including the persistent organic pollutants, which have likely been contaminating the surrounding environment during their storage or processing activity. So this result of chemical analysis has been published in the technical reports based on the analysis done by Greenpeace at the Greenpeace Research Laboratory in University of Exeter, UK. So for more detail, you can go to our Greenpeace Malaysia website and to get this technical analysis. So what is our recommendations to Malaysian governments? Yeah, like what YBOs have mentioned, like Malaysian governments have taken some positive actions to crack down against the illegal facility. And meanwhile, I would say like we cannot just rely on Malaysian governments to tackle this problem because this is a global problem. So, but for the recommendation to Malaysian governments, it's good that Malaysian governments are taking some positive action, but at the same time, we also need to have inclusive rehabilitation actions that involve few ministries. The first one is this Ministry of Environment and Water to conduct further environmental investigations to the affected area, especially Jenjarom, Klang, and also Sungai Petani. The Health Ministry should also provide healthcare support to the affected residents because the residents, they got nothing. They are staying there, but all these problems are affecting them. They are the frontliners are bearing the consequences. So the Health Ministry should provide healthcare support to them. And last one is the Anti-Corruption Commission should also reactivate its environmental corruption initiative with emphasis on the corruption related to this management of waste trade. The second one is to also to amend or replace the Environmental Quality Act 1974 with an environmental protections law. And then our recommendations to this global committee is to investigate the waste processing industry with a focus on possible corruption and illegal practices by exporting country and local unlicensed operators. At the same time, also put in place legislation requiring local council and recycling company in country exporting plastic waste to conduct due diligence on importers. Last but not least is the global agreements. We need global agreement to combat the flood of plastic and prioritize a plastic pollution reduction plan to reduce all these single-use plastic in places. So what to sum up, recycling is good, but we cannot just rely on recycling alone. Recycling alone cannot fix our global pollution, plastic pollution fast enough. So therefore, we are also calling governments and companies from all around the world to set clear reductions targets from all these non-essential plastic, and also especially invest in redesigning alternatives such as refill and reuse system. So I want to end it in positive way. So I've been campaigning for this plastic waste issue for a few years. I also managed to speak with few industry and also businesses. And last time, a lot of people are saying like, okay, environmental NGO actually want to like act against the development, which is not correct. We want, what we want to promote is a sustainable development. Like even the economy, so I show this slide, economy, even in the economy, there's a word, another word called eco. So we need eco in economy. And so towards a sustainable economy, the future is in our hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heng, for the very concise and presentation there. Thank you so much on your covering the domestic and then recommendations for the global community as well. So now I see that there are lots of questions that have come in and we have covered so far the three Malaysian speakers, and we are about to move on to shift over to the international community perspective. But maybe in the meantime, YB Yo, I see there are lots of burning questions that are directed to you. I don't know if would you like to take on some of the questions now? Maybe we can take 2 or 3 minutes for you to just quickly comment. If not, then we can still save it for later. Would you like that?
I think you just go ahead first, and then.
Okay. All right. Then we'll come back to those questions. So keep the questions coming in the Q&A box, and the panelists will as well feel free to interact by either the Q&A box or the chat. So now we move on to Sirin Rashid's presentation. Sirin is a global policy advocate with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, Gaia. And their aim is to end plastic pollution by helping to change rules in global and regional policy arenas. Sirin, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Thank you. I just wanted to start off by saying that, like many people here, I've been working on these issues for a little while now, but seeing the evidence that Heng and Mageswari just shared is still as difficult, is still as painful, and it still makes me as angry that this is still happening. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we're setting ourselves up for a global cancer pandemic and severely undermining our environment when we can't afford to do so. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to everyone here for all you've done, and to YBO as well. Your leadership, without your leadership, we wouldn't have the new global rules on plastic waste. Even though, as I'm going to show today, I don't think that they're sufficient. So I'd like to focus today on the international context for the plastic waste trade rules. And by explaining this international context, I hope to bring up some perspectives about what Malaysia and other importing countries could do. And another aside, I'm going to use the word trade, but as former Minister Yeo said, I do agree that in most cases this is dumping, and it's not legitimate waste waste trade in the context of the circular economy. So you've seen this picture, another angle of this picture just shortly that Magus showed. It was taken on the day that the new Basel Convention plastic waste trade rules were decided at the 14th COP of the Basel Convention in May 2019. And these momentous changes, as was evoked already, followed the shockwave sent by China's decision to stop being the world's top plastic waste dumping destination in 2018. As recyclers reliant on the global trade relocated from China to neighboring countries, these countries, including Malaysia, were exposed to the environmental pollution of land and rivers, of coastlines, and the resulting toxic burden on communities that China had been enduring largely alone up to that point. This is a summary of the new rules on plastic waste trade under the Basel Convention. New controls are represented here in orange on the right. This class of plastic waste is defined in opposition to those that remain uncontrolled in green on the left, and hazardous plastic waste that were already controlled in the middle. And so the most important thing here is that there's new prior informed consent controls for plastic waste that are not destined for environmentally sound recycling, also all dirty or unsorted plastic waste, as well as all plastic waste that are made of composite materials like your plastic aluminum laminates or your flexible pouches. It's often multi-material waste that are very hard, if not impossible, to recycle. And finally, it also controls the overwhelming majority of halogenated waste, including PVC. And it's also important to note that hazardous plastic waste is now subject to the Basel Ban Amendment, so OECD countries are forbidden from exporting it to non-OECD countries. So one thing to note here is that the Basel Convention fully allows and even encourages parties to adopt stronger protections than exist in the convention. And so an import ban with no exceptions, such as what China is currently implementing, is perfectly compatible with the convention. And in a way, it even increases the ambition. So that's a good thing. And indeed, as I'll be explaining, these new rules have some limitations. And the current restrictions in the current regulations in Malaysia, in some respects are stronger, in other respects are weaker than these new rules. So one challenge that comes up and that Mageswari has mentioned is that in order to to differentiate between plastics that can still be traded without controls and those that require prior consent, we have to define what is our limit of contamination. At what point is a waste too dirty to make sure that its management and the management of the contaminants will not pose irreparable harm to human health and the environment. And so far, there's been no clear agreement on agreeing on a contamination limit. And the text in the Basel Convention says almost free from contamination. So we should be looking for something very stringent. For example, Hong Kong has adopted 0.5% contamination. Unfortunately, yeah, we're not seeing any commitment here. We're seeing countries that are net importers face significant pressure from industrial actors overseas to have high levels of contaminants allowed, and exporting countries failing to take their responsibility to impose strict quality controls on what they are exporting. And as was shown by Heng and Greenpeace's work, the more contaminants, the more plastics you'll see being open burnt in Malaysia, and the more toxic pollution that will result. And it's worth noting that contamination or not, most plastics produced today are unrecyclable by design. And most recyclable plastics are not recycled because there's a deficit of separate collection of waste. And once wastes are contaminated, it's no longer economically viable in many countries to clean them and sort them from recycling. And another challenge is also the low price of virgin plastic, which makes it very hard for recyclables to compete. So if we're really serious about recycling, the first thing we should be looking at is reducing the volume of plastics we are generating and increasing the price of virgin plastics. So here, just touching on several shortcomings of the new laws. The new laws require that only plastics that go to environmentally sound recycling are exported without controls, but we don't have any international clear definition of what environmentally sound recycling is, except that harm to human health and the environment should be minimized. So we actually need a set of guarantees to ensure that this environmentally sound recycling happens in practice, which don't exist at the moment, neither in Malaysia, and I would add, not even in the European Union. So first of all, when we look at environmental impacts from recycling, it's very clear that the technologies that are marketed as chemical recycling, pyrolysis and gasification, because of their toxic impacts, because of their climate pollution, they cannot be regarded as environmentally sound recycling. So that's one thing. First of all, the recycling destinations should be limited to mechanical recycling. Second of all, we have to have clear standards on toxic and climate emissions. And the toxic emissions are very important because, as Mageswari highlighted, as the IPEN research has showed, we have toxics resulting from additives in plastic going into the recycled product itself, let alone the air emissions or the wastewater emissions. We also need very strong regulations on microplastic emissions from wastewater. Recycling involves a lot of washing, and as some research has shown, for example, in Ecuador, the wastewater can be very, very rich in toxic chemicals and microplastics. So we need very clear standards on that. And we also need very clear standards on how residuals from those recycling operations are managed. That's not currently the case. My colleague Jane will go further into this issue of what happens when waste.
Thanks, Sirine.
Thank you.
Sirine, yeah, thank you, Sirine, so much. Sorry, I have to interrupt you here. No thank you. And up next, can I invite Jane? Jane Bremer is the Zero Waste Australia campaign coordinator for the National Toxics Network, NTN, working collaboratively with NGOs, experts, and researchers to resist incinerators and establish zero waste city models. Jane, over to you now. Thank you.
Very much. I'm talking to you from Western Australia, There's a bit of feedback there. I hope that's not bothering you. But I'm talking to you from Western Australia. I'm on Noongar Budja and pay my respects to the First Nations people here in the city of Boorloo, which is Perth in Western Australia. I'm really happy to be given this opportunity to highlight an issue that I think is of growing concern, particularly for the Asia Pacific region and certainly for campaigners internationally and in Australia. And that relates to the issue of what could be considered a Trojan horse in the solutions that are being put forward for the plastic waste problem. As I said, I am a campaigner in Western Australia, primarily working to resist incineration in Australia, and I coordinate the Zero Waste Australia campaign. Driving much of the work we do is an acknowledgement that our waste window into our materials production systems. So we can see that our waste represents a really highly contaminated, multi-layered, complex source of materials and chemicals. So it makes it very difficult to separate into clean streams as much as we would like to, and as much as our governments and industry claim to be able to process our waste into clean streams. The very nature of our materials production processes makes that very difficult. In Australia, you will have heard that Australia has a waste export ban. It's the first waste export ban in the world. And there's a time frame there for a whole range of materials that will no longer be able to be exported. But basically, it really is a plan to establish the rollout of a massive plastic waste reprocessing infrastructure, and not only in Australia, but well into the Asia Pacific region as well. And this has come about because of the exposés that we've seen thanks to China and much of the Southeast Asian countries exposing Australia's waste dumping. You will have recently heard Australia has released their National Plastics Plan. Also at the same time, a very interesting policy document on the environmentally responsible trade in waste plastics in the Asia Pacific region, which unfortunately focuses very much on waste leakage into the environment, and really is about developing a policy in Australia to continue waste exports in an environmentally responsible way that involves investing in reprocessing infrastructure in the Asia Pacific region. And we know that from industry, we can see that Resource Co, which is a very big industry in Malaysia particularly, and in Australia, they have a strong relationship, have a history of taking Australia's refuse-derived fuel, burning refuse-derived fuel in Malaysia, and very much so in South Australia and increasingly in Australia. So just very quickly, a refuse-derived fuel is very much made up of our residual waste from our municipal solid waste stream. And we know that our residual waste stream is really made up of materials that can be recycled and composted. So every country has a different waste management, separation and collection system. How you do that determines how much residual waste and the type of residual waste that you generate. So we're directing recyclable and compostable waste materials into the residual waste stream, which has no outcome except to be burnt in incinerators or reprocessed into refuse-derived fuel to be burnt in cement kilns and other combustion technologies and industries like pulp mills and the like. We can see here heavily in Australia that refuse-derived fuel production is being heavily promoted by industry and government, and there are lots of partnerships, particularly with big corporate disposal companies like Suez and Veolia. They really run our waste management in Australia, and they're partnering with Resource Co to direct our residual waste and I believe contaminated plastics into the refuse-derived fuel outcome. So I'm raising these issues in this platform as a warning to Southeast Asian countries to be on the lookout for the quality and the importations of refuse fuel, not only from Australia, but from all OECD countries. And this is the Comtrade code that you can find when you do these searches on the Comtrade database. We know from studies overseas, and this is a study I believe that was undertaken in Italy, where at a facility that has been using refuse-derived fuel, and you can see that some of the pollutants are significantly increased compared to incineration. And there's a good table here showing that. Also that particular toxic substances are very highlighted in refuse-derived fuel burning, particularly PCBs at scandalous 1,000 times higher than incineration, and a whole range of heavy metals also is significantly higher. So the range of very serious toxic substances that are very high in refuse-derived fuel burning. We know that our colleagues in Malaysia have already exposed Australia for dumping waste and burning refuse-derived fuel in the Malaysian region. We know that OECD countries and all countries have a commitment to upholding human rights. They relate to hazardous substances, and we need to act in a very collaborative and collegiate way to prevent contamination and uphold human rights. We know that the solutions lie in zero waste city models, which is the Asia Pacific region is already leading, and that we need these models to get to a circular economy that doesn't include energy recovery and incineration. We know Europe already has these case studies, and we should expect the same standards from OECD countries as they would impose on countries in the Asia Pacific region. So that's my message to the Malaysian government and to all Southeast Asian countries, is that the Trojan horse of refuse-derived fuel burning is really something you need to be aware of, and we're watching very closely in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Now, let's move on over to our last panelist before we commence our Q&A session. We now listen to James Sweeney. James is the head of the Illicit Trade, Health and Environment Unit at the European Anti-Fraud Office, known by the acronym OLAF, under the European Commission. James, the floor is yours.
Okay, I hope everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. First of all, I'm going to present my screen if I can. And now can I operate this?
There should be a green share screen button at the bottom.
Yeah, indeed. It's a long way from Europe. Maybe it doesn't want to travel that far.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, is there something there now? Can everybody see that?
So you have commenced screen sharing, but it's the screen of the Zoom session that we're having right now.
Okay, okay. Well, listen, I mean, if we're running into technical difficulties, I won't, I mean, the dear colleagues there already have the slides. If they want to put them up while I talk through it, it's fine. But otherwise, I don't want to spend my time extolling the virtues of OLAF or what we do or what we don't do. I just want to go straight to focus on the subject matter of this morning's very, very interesting and very enlightening discussion. I mean, OLAF as such is and very briefly, we're an EU body. We're the only EU body that has the powers to do inspections and investigations, which can include the matter of illegal waste exports. However, in dealing with illegal waste exports, we have to understand that from the European perspective and from the OLAF perspective, the structure is such that while OLAF can coordinate actions at an EU level, the actual judicial or police investigations into matters of illegal waste exports rest in the hands of the member states. So yes, thank you very much. And when we have cases ongoing in member states like Italy, Belgium, Romania, the Netherlands, it is not just those countries that are concerned insofar as the European Union export of illegal waste is concerned. What we're talking about here is waste that can travel across the internal borders of the EU, and therefore our work is to coordinate the actions at EU level between these different member states. That's on the EU side in dealing with specific cases of illegal waste exports. Then on the international side, we do have quite a number of cases around the world where we actively engage with the competent authorities of the importing countries, and that includes Malaysia. So there, again, the key to success in these matters is to get as much information from the importing member states, from the competent authorities in the importing member states, and getting a harmonized approach between the competent authorities in these importing member states. And so that information then, when received, is fed back by my team into the investigation processes of the different member states. So the key to trying to deal with this issue at that international level is coordination, it's information sharing, it's intelligence sharing, and it's really working within the framework. More eminent speakers than I on this issue this morning has explained how through the Basel Convention and other changes that have been made, that the global framework for dealing with this has changed. But we find ourselves that dealing with different countries down around the world, they have different approaches to it still. So there is a lack of unity of purpose, if you like, or a lack of unity of approach, perhaps is a better way of putting it, and a lack of understanding of the levels that are required to deal with these issues are key to success for us. Now, what OLAF gets involved in, as I said, in assisting member states in dealing with these issues is coordination across the EU. As I mentioned, there is a single market in the EU, so movement of this this type of thing is probably easier within the EU than across international borders. But once it leaves the EU international border, that is when OLAF begins to play a role. So again, my advice to anyone who is dealing with this at the competent authority level in the countries of import is to really coordinate as much as you can within your own country and share as much information as you can with us. If I take the example of taking returns of what is declared and acknowledged to be illegal waste, even the return of shipments of that, which my good colleague Luigi and others are actively involved in at member state level, that is a very drawn out, legally heavy process. And again, as much information that we can get with from customs authorities, from ministries of health, are very important for us to be able to continue to do our work and work with you as international partners. I mean, we liaise with, of course, as I mentioned, customs authorities around the world, ministries of environment in Malaysia and others, as an example. We have a very good working relations with Interpol in these matters. And as you see there from the slides that have been presented, and thank you again for the technical assistance, our work covers a whole, not just waste, illegal waste export, but it's a whole area of fake goods. It's IPR. It's the whole area of fake medicines. Anything of that nature, Olaf will try and help international authorities and have our own specific functions in dealing with this. So, as I said, I don't want to. I'd rather deal with this on a question and answer basis rather than just extol the virtues of Olaf or what we can do or what not. My key message is this is about partnership. It's about information sharing. It's about intelligence sharing and working together on it. And the more information that we can get, the more timely information that we can get, particularly from customs authorities worldwide, is a key for us to be successful with our customs partners and our member states partners within the EU. So, I mean, the slides are there available. They outline in more detail what Olaf does and what our mandate is, and I'll gladly deal with any questions arising on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James. I thought that was excellent. Now, thank you to all the panelists again, and let's move on swiftly now to the question and answer session. We've got a good number of questions in the box. Shall we all turn to the Q&A box in the Zoom function? So there's a little democracy happening here with the most popular questions being upvoted. I think YB, maybe there are the two questions there on top. Let me just read this out for the benefit of our friends who are participating not on Zoom. The first question by Sudi Yo to YB Yobi Yin. Is a complete ban on importing plastic waste feasible? All type of plastic waste. Locally, we have enough plastic waste. What we need is to improve the recycling system and technology, market, and public education and regulation. So that's asking for your comments. And then let's take two questions together, yeah, YB. And the second question is from Lei Ping Hua. Question to YB Yo. Do you know how many plastic recycle factories registered in Malaysia? Mean they are legal with license? How many of them process import plastic waste? And how many of them process local plastic waste? Yeah. YB Yo.
So I think Lei Ping asked the question so that we know that whether or not Malaysian plastic waste actually enough to cater for the Malaysian recycling, plastic recycling industry. So, and it actually related to what Sudi has asked. Sudi has asked whether a complete ban on importing plastic waste is feasible. To tell you the truth, if I'm an environment minister and I'm just in charge of DOE, a complete ban is very good for me. So I don't need to do any work. So what happened was this, is that it is because the industry, the plastic recycling industry has always been there for a long time without any problem until the black sheep came in. So they have been importing plastic under HS 3915 with the solid waste department under the local housing and the Housing and Local Council Ministry. So it is another ministry that gives the license, that gives the AP to factories, to local plastics factories to recycle. So what we advocated after the episode was that we want to not to increase any further. Let's say, for example, if you want to build another plastic recycling factory, you will now need a DOE. You will now need an environment assess report to the DOE and get a permission from the DOE. And these requirements come from the local government. Let's say, for example, if I need to have a business license, they will ask you, okay, you need a DOE approval. Then that is how we get the data. But the current ones, what Puyi said was right. Before this, you actually do not need DOE, the EIA report to actually start a factory recycling, because factory recycling, the plastic recycling is actually not a big, it's not a rocket science. It is actually much more less complex than, for example, a petrochemical plant. Then, so what happened was the illegal factory. So I think one of the panelists actually talks about that you actually cannot earn money. Let's say, if you recycle your mixed plastic waste, a contaminated plastic waste, legally, following everything under Environmentally Quality Act, that means you actually cannot earn money. because it doesn't make sense for them. That is why a lot of people go for illegal recycling so that they can earn money from it. If you want to comply to EIA with the technology they have, actually it is almost impossible. That is why the local recycling factories actually always import sort of quite a clean homogeneous plastic, because only then you can have a margin. I think Serene talks about virgin plastic is very cheap, and recycled plastic is also very cheap. So if a recycled plastic very cheap, what you need to do is to get cheap raw material, cheap process, and get a very competitive recycled plastic. And it is possible because we have plastic recycling factories that is complying to the EQA, Environmental Quality Act. So the short answer to that question, to Sudi's question, is this. Our proposal was this. Our proposal was, we will have those that already have HS 3915 permits. We will through the year reduce the number, the tons or the capacity you can import, so that you through the year have the time to locally source it. To tell you the truth, the problem with us is that although the recycling rate that we report is 20-something%, it's bullshit. It is nowhere near. So you can't actually get the source here. So what we do is this, is so that our solid waste department have time to increase the recycling rate, the waste separation in Malaysia, and at the same time, the industry can then slowly reduce their waste, their foreign import waste. So, and this needs a very good coordination with solid waste department. And this is also why, as an environment minister, I always think that why is it that solid waste department is under a local council ministry? Because it's not only in the recycling that we have a huge problem. A lot of people say, environment minister, you are in charge of reduce, reuse, recycle. As a matter of fact, it's actually under the local government ministry. And it doesn't really make sense, but it is traditional. As we go forward towards, I think, for challenges in the future, I think it is very important for solid waste department to be the environment ministry, so that whether it is recycling, reduce, reuse, everything, the environment ministry can be a part of it, and then we can then make a very good decision on it.
Thank you, YBO. That makes a lot of sense. So flowing from that, let's take the next two questions that are related to the circular economy. And these ones are directed to Jane. So let me read out the two questions. The first one is from Henry Chong, asking, chemical recycling or pyrolysis seems to be the way forward to circularly recycle mixed and contaminated plastics. Should it not be promoted? So this is the first question. The second one is from Zini Yo. Hi, Jane. Thank you for your insights on RDF. What are the general risks for the use of mixed plastics waste in construction material? There are several popular models of turning mixed waste into plastic bricks or building boards. Do these face similar risks with RDF? What are the standards and certifications that can credibly certify the outputs of these processes? I think a clear understanding and an affordable or credible way to evaluate the hazardous risk of these outputs are important, so we avoid throwing good solutions for absorbing mixed plastic waste into building material. Jane?
So the short answer to both of those questions really resides in the fact that mixed plastic wastes are not recyclable. And so rather than finding new uses for that and ways to burn it, bury it, put it in new products, we have to focus on not making mixed plastic waste in the first place, because we have a situation globally where every corner of our planet now is contaminated with plastic. It's in our bodies, it's in our newborn babies, it's in our food, it's in our air, it's everywhere. We have a global crisis caused by mixed plastic, non-recyclable plastic waste and its leakage into the environment and the global mismanagement of this material. So getting back to chemical recycling and pyrolysis, chemical recycling, and I'm assuming you're talking about pyrolysis to make chemicals or fuel. because pyrolysis is also known as an incineration technology as well. All of that depends on what happens with the resulting product. If you're chemically recycling to make a fuel that you're going to burn, there's no great leap forward here. That is still greenhouse gases and toxic air pollutants to the environment. You are just using plastic, which is essentially a fossil fuel, turning it into a fuel that can then be burnt. So the only benefit of chemical recycling is where we're replacing those virgin materials. We need closed loop recycling systems, not downcycling. And this is where the issue of corporate greenwash really comes in. We hear a lot about technologies and you know, innovative solutions, and often they're thick with greenwash about being safe, clean, environmentally sound, when in effect, they really just take a very problematic material that we shouldn't be making, turning it into more chemicals or more fuels to make more dirty plastics or more dirty fuel outcomes, which is a total negative impact on the environment. So unless chemical recycling is part of a closed loop system, I don't think chemical recycling and pyrolysis is the pathway to a safe circular economy. What we need at the front end is to redesign these products so that they can be safely and easily recycled. But first and foremost, we need to be moving to a reuse economy. And so if we're not making plastic products that can be safely recycled, can be easily composted and safely composted or reused, we shouldn't be making them at all. So we have to guard against creating perverse outcomes by providing another disposal outlet for a material that we shouldn't be making in the first place. Just on the construction materials, using mixed plastic waste in construction materials, many of you may have seen it's a big thing in Australia. We've seen the University of Technology, Sydney, all sorts of gurus coming out of the woodwork, turning any old kind of waste into fabulous new construction materials. Again, we're making products out of a material that has no in our society and poses significant human health and environmental impacts. So the construction and demolition waste stream is one of the fastest and largest growing waste streams globally. Our construction and demolition waste stream is massive and increasing in volume and toxicity. So making construction materials out of mixed plastic waste really doesn't make much sense, because toxics in, as I said in my presentation, toxics in equals toxics out. What happens when that construction material becomes waste again? What we've done is we've contaminated the construction and demolition waste stream. So overall, what we have to do is really be very mindful of poisoning the circular economy. And if we want to avoid poisoning the circular economy by plasticizing it with all of our waste plastics, while at the same time, industry is telling us they're increasing production by 5-fold, we're not winning the war on plastics and we're not winning the war on waste. All we're doing is we're contaminating and poisoning the circular economy. So it's a seductive idea just to take our mixed plastic waste and make new products out of it. But as we know, that's not really recycling, that's downcycling. Right. And at the end of the day, we end up with a hazardous waste. And that's because many of the materials that are going through this process aren't recyclable. They get toxicity, gets concentrated into the new products. And before we know it, we've got a very large hazardous waste stream, and we don't globally have very good ways of managing that. And it's certainly not a waste stream that OECD countries should be shifting to the vulnerable Asia Pacific region, not only in terms of environmental justice, but the global, the inherent climate and environmental impacts. The Asia Pacific region around the equator is very vulnerable to the types of technologies they employ, the pollution that's generated from them, and the impacts on the marine environment and the climate. We need to be really careful about what technologies that that are inherently polluting are being pushed into the Asia Pacific region, because we all live on this planet. We all rely on the ocean. Asia Pacific region has a right to fish in their waters and live with clean air and soil. It is inconceivable that OECD countries would find all these ways to hide mixed plastic waste in new products, in so-called techno fixes that really just continue to dump in the Asia Pacific region. So
thank you, Jane. Thank you.
Not the answer that you were hoping for, but I have.
So thank you, Jane. I think, yes, there needs to be a unity of understanding, I think, in, like how James has mentioned earlier, unity of purpose, a unity of approach, and a unity of understanding of all relevant facts to achieve environmental justice. Sirin Rashid, thank you so much for interacting already with the attendees in the Q&A box and in the chat. Sirin, is there any particular question that you'd like to address on air? Maybe I can give a little bit of time to you, Sirin. Maybe about 2 minutes or so.
Sure. There was a question. Or rather a statement saying that all plastics are recyclable if it's done right. And I think that Jane's already answered a big part of that by pointing to the fact that we all know the limits of mechanical recycling, but these new technology, not new actually, pyrolysis is decades old. These technologies that are being remarketed by producers of plastic by the American Chemistry Council as the solution are not recycling plastic. They're transforming plastics to fuel. They're toxic. They're polluting. But the wider point is we need to look at the system's impact. We need to look at the big picture. If we look across the life cycle of plastic, at the climate impacts and at the health impacts from the moment that they're extracted from the environment to the end of life, even when there's recycling happening, then it's just not worth it. You know, it might be a material that offers us some convenience, but at what price, right? I think with the pandemic today, we have an agreement that, you know, health before wealth. And both, actually, we don't want to choose, but we definitely don't want to sacrifice our health for a little bit of convenience of having single-use packaging and disposable packaging and items in our economy, just so we can live a little bit faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Sirin. Now, back to the question Q&A box. There was a question by Anne Bendagen to YBO regarding the aim to go towards zero single-use plastic by 2030. This was a roadmap introduced by YBO. And maybe YBO, would you like to comment on Anne's question very quickly?
So, because the discussion today is about international plastic recycling, and this is mostly on the domestic plastic. So I do not think that I would like to deal further, but I can see that Zini Yo has questions on whether or not we should encourage a recycling industry. Actually, I, as an environment minister, of course, we should be not only on plastics, but also on e-waste, on scrap metals, etc. So we need to encourage environmentally Quality Act compliant recycling factories and that recycling industries, but also at the same time, we need to be able to have an environment that separate waste. We need to have an environment that do all this. And at the same time, for plastics as a general, I think we should start from reduce, reuse, and recycle. We should first start with reduction of plastics, and also packaging and designing of products then become very important. That is why the discussion, international discussion, we are talking about consumption and demand management. I don't have I don't have time to deal with it more in depth, but suffice to say that it is very important for Malaysia, although we have gone through this not so nice episode, that we should not be giving up on recycling industries, and it is a green industry. Let us not, because of black sheep, we rule this out completely, but we should strengthen our regulation, strengthen our machineries for enforcement, and reduce corruption in the process, and then we will be able to regulate this very well.
Yeah, thanks, YB. I think, yes, one of the voices, maybe Puyi, you can tell us, share just very quickly on maybe the perspectives of the plastic recyclers that you have part of your research.
I would like to leave the space for other panelists to speak.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so if there are any plastic recyclers in our group, please feel free to share comments in the chat.
Right. So, okay, I'm going back to the Q&A box as well. And we have just a few more minutes. We could take one or two more questions. And so there's a question from Facebook that says, Penang again and again, more than 200 containers of plastic waste from all over the world is stuck at the North Butterworth container terminal. And then that's a comment on what's the situation over there. We've got Yat Fai Yong. Now there's a question to all guests where Yat Fai Yong says, it seems that the US is continuing exporting plastic waste to Malaysia after the Basel Convention takes effect. Is it possible for Malaysia or other government to disclose detailed information, including the origin, weight, types, company name of illegal plastic waste shipments, so that green groups based in other countries, example, origin from the illegal shipment, could leverage on it to engage their media to push local government to keep in an effective way? Do any countries disclose its information on their government website? Information transparency is important for collaborative monitoring. Thank you. So would someone like to comment on the themes here from this question? Maybe James or any, it's open to any of our panelists.
I just answer on the port first. I think the 200 at the port is better than it's actually end up outside of the ports. That means that it is in the community. What we need is to go through a it's actually a very, very taxing and very complicated process that we need to go through to return the container. So I think perhaps it is because of that it got stuck there. Hopefully with the new Basel Convention, it gets the process gets a little bit easier, and with our new SOPs, it will be easier. And on the questions on the just now the other one, what was the on the
that was from the longer question from Yat Fai Yong.
Yeah. What
question
was
to all guests?
Yeah, the question was what again? I wanted to answer that.
It was this question to all guests.
It's possible though to disclose. It is a very, very good. It's a very good suggestion, and that is how exactly we can track. At this moment, especially developed countries, you do not need to actually report on how you recycle. You only report on your recycling rate, and your recycling rate, it can be sent for recycling overseas. So it will be good if there is a really clear international, I think that will be the next move for Basel Convention or other convention on the clear disclosure. If you are exporting waste, where are you exporting? Who are the one that's exporting and on how much? I think with this disclosure, it will very much help us to identify syndicate. I don't have time to go through that. I believe there is international syndicate in this, and for the international community, I think we should be checking on this and see whether or not there is these international syndicates that actually try to profit from the subsidies of the developed country for recycling, and then yet they do the dumping at the developing world. Okay, I will shout.
Okay, thanks, YB. Pui, you have a question. You're muted.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Mr. Sweeney from Olaf if they could share any information about their investigations into the illegal plastic waste trade, if any.
Yeah, I mean, I gladly I answered a question there in the private chat box there to an interested observer or participant this morning. And on the specific question that was mentioned there about the return of shipments of illegal waste, as everybody will know, certainly those in governmental circles, this is a very long, it's a very long and difficult legally laden process. And Olaf is assisting a number of countries around the world in trying to deal with this process. And the key, including indeed the good, lovely host country of today, And all we can ask is that please give us as much information as you can in a harmonized way across the services that deal with these issues in the recipient countries. Because to return illegal shipments as I keep stressing, to any of the member states, of the 27 member states of the European Union, it has to follow the law, the legal provisions of the member state of export. And again, and as I mentioned in the private answer to the interested participant earlier, one instance of this can involve any number of member states in the EU. So the different legal requirements across the different member states have to be followed as well. So that is my message in terms of the returns. Please give us as much and as quality and as harmonized and as agreed information from within that recipient country, because not always do we find that that recipient countries actually agree on what happened when there was an import. Anyway, I won't get into the operational details. I think I've sent enough coded messages this morning for people to take me up on them or not. On the general insight, as I said, I can only repeat what I said earlier. It's about intelligence sharing in real time, agreement across the stakeholders across the world of what we're dealing with and how it is best, how to enforce cases where there are obvious breaches of the international order. I mean, as a friend of mine always says, James, you're always invited to the party when something is wrong, and that is true. But we have a necessary and important function in it. And I think the feedback then that we bring through our casework and feeding it back into the policy-making cycle, and in our feedback we can give into the increasing harmonization of the world order of dealing with something like this trade. That is something that we continue to do. And as I mentioned privately in the chat box, this work is growing. It is, and Olaf recognizes that, and we'll continue to try and do whatever we can to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, James. I think indeed, I think so many important themes have come out from this session today. Obviously, we wish we had more time. I wish I had more time to field some questions of my own. But I think there's a lot to think about, and I think the clear messaging is for closer partnerships, smarter partnerships between the various sectors. Now, that's all the time we have now for questions and answers. So what remains to be done now is to, in the last 2 or 3 minutes, let me invite Cynthia Gabriel, the director of C4, to give the closing, just to close the session. Cynthia, if you're ready.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Q. This has been a really, really insightful session, especially for a good governance anti-corruption group like us. We are venturing into this whole area of environmental governance and learning so much along the way. I just wanted to remember a couple of things in this entire insightful an hour and a half. I think the first thing is so much of what former Minister Yobi Yin has been telling us, the actual process inside and the struggles and the challenges within on how to actually tackle an immediate concern of another country far away, China, actually changing its policies and how we become receiving ends of a policy. And something very interesting she said, that legal recycling cannot make money. It's not profitable. And so there was where our interest was. It was actually to study the illegal trade. How come so many companies were actually proliferating in smaller towns in Malaysia? And it kind of opened a can of worms because we learned so many things after that. But one of the things we wanted to do in summary was to actually link the climate crisis, environmental governance with the entire area of anti-corruption, of accountable governance, and of the right to information. And I think so much of it was covered by the panelists. It was really brilliant presentations from everyone. But I did want to actually remind us that what we've been talking about actually is very much captured within the Sustainable Development Goals. This one is SDG 15 on climate action. And the one that C4 has been paying a lot of attention to and focusing is on SDG 16, which is one, we actually need strong institutions. We really need strong institutions. And I think YBO has been talking about an overall approach. Mr. Sweeney has been talking about the lack of unity of approach in actually tackling the problem. And so therein lies opportunities for corruption, that the illegal trade would actually allow for greater profits. It's all about money. It's also a lot about ensuring that money doesn't become an impediment to sustainable development. So I've said as much as I could within the 2 minutes that I have, but I also wanted to say that there are several other conventions in the governance framework. For example, the UN Convention Against Corruption, which is extremely comprehensive. And if we could actually spend following months and weeks after this to look at how the Basel Convention and the UNCTAD could be a stronger, potent force for us to build our advocacy upon. The right to information, which is also part of SDG Goal 16, and so on and so forth. So I'm really hoping very much that with the cooperation of the Bar Council, previously on our expert meeting, and now with Sahabat Alam Malaysia, and our introduction to so many important partners internationally, we would in this region somehow be able to have an OLAF of our own, an anti-fraud office that can look at various transgressions, malpractices, and so on. And I think we have so much expertise here in this room today that we can work towards our future endeavors. And so much has already been done, but the trade out there is posing more and more new challenges. So with that, I just wanted to thank all the speakers, the partners that we have cooperated with, Bar Council, Greenpeace, Sahabat Alam Malaysia, and many other international partners who have made this webinar really, really interesting and insightful. So thank you very much. Thank you. I think this is the end. There's no other speech after this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank
over there.
for hosting us.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
the best to you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.